Welcome to The Explainer. I'm your host, and today we're putting on our cold case investigator hats. We're stepping right out of the bright lights and walking down into the dusty, quiet archives of American criminal history. We are going to be looking at the darkest mysteries that, incredibly, still remain completely unsolved to this very day. So, date, present day. Location, the evidence room. Listen, today's explainer is definitely not going to be looking at neatly closed cases with a tidy little bow at the end. Instead, we're cracking open the historical files of perpetrators who somehow managed to slip right through the cracks of the justice system. And that brings us to our core question for today's investigation. What happens when the physical evidence just isn't enough, and the killer simply walks away? That's our mission right now. We're going to analyze the crime scenes, the MOs, and the lingering evidence left behind across 4 distinctly terrifying eras of American history. All right, Case File 01, the Villisca Scene. We're winding the clock way back, over a century, to the seemingly quiet, completely ordinary town of Villisca, Iowa, in the year 1912. Let's look at the cold, hard facts of the crime scene itself. It was the morning of June 9th, 1912, when a woman arrived to visit her brother, Josiah Moore. What she actually discovered was an absolute nightmare. Josiah, his wife Sarah, their 4 young children, and 2 visiting girls, Ina May and Lena Gertrude Stillinger, were all found dead in their beds. And the primary piece of physical evidence? The literal axe used in the crime was just left right there in the house. The absolutely staggering point of this case is that number: 8. 8 victims. The sheer, silent brutality of it is genuinely terrifying. Entire families, including young kids between the ages of 5 and 11, bludgeoned in their sleep with the very weapon left behind on the property. And yet somehow, the trail went completely cold. Investigators were basically forced to weigh 2 main theories. Was this a random drifting stranger who just broke in? Or was it a local enemy who knew the family and targeted them specifically? There were massive, extensive investigations, and a few suspects were even identified, but nobody was ever brought to trial. The theories bounced from that drifter to a local enemy or even a local cult. But because there was a total lack of any other physical clues, the investigation hit a dead end, allowing the killer to just vanish into history. Moving on to Case File 02, the Axeman's Taunt. Fast forward to May 1918, dropping into the humid, tense streets of New Orleans, where an unidentified killer started specifically targeting Italian immigrant families. The active timeline for this reign of terror spans from May 1918 to October 1919, across New Orleans and Gretna, Louisiana. His MO was a horrifying nighttime home invasion. The guy would break in while the families were sleeping, attack them with an axe, often mutilate them, and sometimes just leave them for dead. As you can imagine, this created a city literally entirely gripped by panic, while the police were completely baffled. Then comes the chilling psychological evidence he left behind. In 1919, the killer actually sent a letter to the New Orleans newspapers. He wrote, "I am a man of music, not a human butcher." In this letter, he's openly taunting the police, claiming he's completely invincible. But he also made this totally bizarre promise. He said he would spare the life of anyone playing jazz music on the night of March 19th. And believe it or not, his bizarre jazz prediction actually worked. Not a single murder happened that night. But shortly after that, the killer disappeared completely. He just never resurfaced. He left behind nothing but conflicting suspect profiles. People wondered, was he a mafia enforcer, just a deranged individual? There was even speculation that the Axeman was actually an unidentified woman, though honestly no real evidence ever supported that claim. Without conclusive proof, the whole case remains a massive mystery. Next up, Case File 03, the Black Dahlia Severance. Post-war Los Angeles, 1947. We are digging into the infamous and tragic murder of 22-year-old aspiring actress Elizabeth Short. Let's set the scene for this one. On January 15, 1947, her body was found in a vacant lot in Leimert Park, Los Angeles. The media immediately dubbed her the Black Dahlia, and the case turned into an absolute national obsession overnight. But despite the police receiving literally thousands of tips from the public, 0 arrests were ever made. To understand why investigators were at such a loss, you have to look at the extremely specific, gruesome nature of the crime scene itself. The victim was bisected at the waist. Her body had been entirely drained of blood, and her face was slashed from her mouth to her ears. The physical state of the body showed this incredibly specific, horrifying surgical precision that absolutely shocked the entire nation. Because of that exact surgical precision, investigators really had to weigh the prominent theories. Were they looking at the work of an experienced serial killer, or was this a single offender committing an intensely violent crime of passion? There was even speculation that the killer was a member of the military or law enforcement because of the precise nature of the mutilation. But ultimately, that massive media frenzy and the sheer volume of totally useless tips probably hindered the police from finding the actual perpetrator. Just another file left open. Which brings us to Case File 04, the Zodiac Ciphers. We're heading over to the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 1960s to introduce the most notorious taunter of police in American history. We can track the exact chronological progression of Zodiac's reign of terror. It kicks off in December 1968 in Benicia with the murder of 2 victims. Then, July 1969 in Vallejo, where one was killed and one, Michael Maggio, actually managed to survive. In September 1969, he strikes at Lake Berryessa. And finally, in October 1969, in San Francisco. So we're looking at 5 known murdered victims, 1 survivor, and an entire region living in pure, unchecked terror. But what really makes this case unique is the definitive evidence he left behind. The cipher, a secret or disguised way of writing, a code. The Zodiac killer used these ciphers extensively, literally mailing them directly to newspapers, like the San Francisco Chronicle and the Vallejo Times-Herald. He wasn't just hiding, he was actively challenging and taunting the police to solve them. And one of those ciphers actually was solved by a team of amateur codebreakers back in 1969. Reading the translation gives you a look into a pure, terrifying motive. He wrote, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." But despite having his own words right in front of them and going through multiple suspect theories over the decades, the Zodiac's identity has never been conclusively proven. The files remain open. The evidence gathers dust. As we start to close the evidence room on today's explainer, the reality really sets in. These perpetrators, from a quiet little house in Villisca to the bustling streets of New Orleans, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, evaded justice entirely. And they did it despite the physical weapons they dropped and the psychological trails of letters and ciphers they left right in the open. Which leaves us with one final, very provocative thought to chew on. If these exact same crimes happened tonight, would modern forensics finally be enough to close the files? Or would these historical ghosts still manage to outsmart today's science? Thank you so much for exploring these dark archives with me today. Keep asking questions, and I will see you in the next explainer.